Then I was scared. So I'm like, okay, what the hell does that mean? I got to the kind of October of 2018 and thought, I'm really tired. I really don't feel very well. And it was the beginning of December that I started getting some serious headaches. 5 months of struggling with the business, keeping everything going, feeling more and more exhausted, but feeling like I've got to keep going. It's like a treadmill, isn't it? It's your responsibility. You've got clients relying on you, customers and a team. I got a call on Wednesday afternoon saying, you need to bring an overnight bag. You're going to come into the hospital. You're going to have to stay overnight. You're going to have to run a whole load of tests and investigations. The consultant will call you in an hour.
You're talking about running a business alongside all of this. Where did this leave the business?
I just carried on. I just flexed what I did.
Do you regret that? Hello and welcome to Leaders in Disguise, the podcast where we dive into the realities of leadership and mental health, peeling back the layers on what it's truly like to lead with resilience. I'm your host Gary Parsons, and today we're joined by a remarkable guest, Heather McLellan. Heather has spent her career supporting people's mental and physical health in a high-stakes works environment, but her journey has brought insights into the true costs and rewards of leadership during difficult times too. Before we get started, I just want to thank each of you for tuning in to and being part of this journey. Leaders in Disguise has turned into more than a podcast. It's now a movement. Together we're challenging the stigma around mental health and leadership, advocating for vulnerability and showing day by day that leaders don't have it all together all the time and don't have to have it together to succeed. In today's episode, Heather shares her experiences navigating health crises, setting boundaries and lessons that she's learned about balancing resilience and vulnerability. This one is packed with insights, so you don't want to miss it. Let's get into it. Heather, thank you so much for coming along. Just for complete transparency, we've known each other for a fair few months now. Mm-hmm. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah. But,
it's a bit bizarre to sit down together and do this very formally.
Yes, it is. It's several months, I think, because of summer and all the stuff that happened. So yeah, it's nice to see you.
Absolutely. Yeah. How are you doing? Are you keeping well?
I am. Yes.
Good. I know you're laughing because you've had boots on your feet, you've had all sorts of stuff going on, but you're actually
a slightly calamitous summer. My middle name should be Calamity. But yeah, I'm doing really well now, so it's good.
Fabulous, and really important that we sit down. I remember, although I feel like I've known you 5 months now, something like that. I think it will be.
I don't really know. It's just before Christmas, I think, or just after. Maybe.
Yeah, time flies by when you're having fun.
Exactly.
I'll let you know when that happens. There's not much fun going on. And busy working, of course, both of us. Mm-hmm. I remember going to sit down and watch you at a local event.
Yes.
An amazing centre locally to where we live, and got to learn more about you. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be people watching and listening that don't really know who Heather is.
No.
So give us a quick intro to you, and then we'll dive deep into the world of where it all started.
Okay, so the start of the beginning, I guess, of my career, I qualified as a physio now almost 30 years ago. And I'd had to do that actually from mid-teens. My mum was a physio, so I always blame it on her. She's amazing, but I blame it on her. I got into it. I just love the idea of an active job. I did want to help people. I probably was heading down the sports route because I was quite sporty. And then I actually I did economics A-level for a very random reason at the time. It wasn't really my first choice, but there we go. And they took us on a field trip to the northeast. And, I was trying to work out what the hell economics had to do with me doing a physio degree. But actually, it was one of the pivotal moments that really has defined the rest of my career. Because one day we went to Nissan car plant, and their medical department was beautiful, really well appointed. I imagine it would have been as good as a football club's at the time. And then probably the day after or 2 days after, we were at Swan Hunter Shipyard. And their medical department...
Big shipyard.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Their medical department was a scruffy little room literally under the ship on the slipway. And the contrast just fascinated me. And the concept of physio and medical services keeping people at work really kind of, I don't know, struck a chord for me. And from that point on, I became really fascinated. So the economics took on a whole new meaning in terms of what it means to keep healthy, keep working, what role healthcare plays in that or doesn't. And then on from there. So I then ended up working at a shipyard, funnily enough. Worked in the NHS to start with, and then I worked at the shipyard up in Barrow-in-Furness that some people may have come across, now BAE Systems. So at 22, I was doing workplace assessments in a nuclear submarine and the like.
Okay.
And
So
building up a service, so treating the employees to help them stay at work. And I did some postgraduate qualifications in occupational health, ergonomics now, instead of economics, ergonomics. And it's really kind of, that was the beginning.
that's where it all started.
Yeah.
And we'll go into the journey of the irony, I guess, in some ways, if you forgive the phrase, of when it all took a bit of a turn for yourself personally.
Yes.
As a leader of a business, of course, you took that and you went on to start your own business and take over the world and fix the world, maybe, perhaps is a better way of saying it.
I worked my way through, so I was at that job for several years, and then I had a family move to Derbyshire, so I went back into the NHS. What's known as a spinal clinical specialist job at the time, so seeing everybody with back pain and mainly the people for whom surgery wasn't suitable. So actually the challenge was, help these people learn to manage potentially lifelong pain. So I did that for a little while, and then in my wisdom decided to go and set up a private practice. It was an interesting experience, and that included some workplace health. But it ultimately didn't work out, and I went back into the NHS, but this time setting up a new department. I've got a track record. Nearly every job I've taken is setting up a new service, and this new service was fitness for work for musculoskeletal conditions, which is a bit of a mouthful, but basically aches and pains and joints and stuff for the staff in a community trust, which was Derbyshire. So we're doing workplace assessments for things like community nurses, for podiatrists. Are they fit for work? When can they return to work? What we call return to work planning. That's the sort of stuff. So I was doing that. I think I did that for about 4 or 5 years. Actually had a couple of great colleagues. We set up a great service, collected really good data, won a couple of national awards, which was great. But it got to the point where I'm always wanting to kind of innovate and move things on and build something bigger. And I was being told repeatedly, no, you can't do that. We're just happy with how it's going. Just keep it as it is. And it was at that point that I thought I would go off and do my own thing again. And then so the business that no doubt we'll talk a little bit about was Designed to Move, which did come from the fact that I believe that movement is part of what's really healthy for us. It certainly is for me. And that when we incorporate movement into our daily lives, that helps us manage all aspects, work and health. So that was a specialist rehab provider for the personal injury sector. So tends to be what we call complex orthopedic trauma or polytrauma. So multiple breaks, usually from things like car accidents, workplace accidents, things like that. So rehabilitating people in what we call a functional way, because they had a very clear functional goal, whether it was to get back cycling as a hobby or get back into an active job, that would be the focus of the rehabilitation. So yeah, that kind of almost brings us up to date.
It's interesting just hearing that journey, because one of the things I've got written down here is that you transitioned into the world of bespoke well-being, and I just heard you saying that, well, there isn't a one size fits all then to people. You just said, well, actually, no. I don't really agree with that terminology because it's not achievable.
No.
How are we talking bespoke at such a deep level then, or is it?
Yes, I mean, so Designed to Move grew out of the fact that a lot of standard, what we call musculoskeletal care, whether it's the NHS outpatient service that you go if you hurt your ankle, or whether it's a workplace service, is designed to intervene early, in theory, if you're lucky. Certainly workplace occupational health services is to intervene early, support you, get treatment, get you back on your feet, get you into work. Now works well for what we call common health conditions, which is your day-to-day musculoskeletal pain, mild mental health conditions, some cardiorespiratory things and stuff. It doesn't work so well if you've had a really major accident and multiple injuries, and it doesn't work so well if you've had 20 years of pain that you now can't control. And that really does require a much more thoughtful, time-consuming, resource heavy in terms of time, not necessarily in terms of kit, to really make a difference for the long term. One of the problems that happens is you get this kind of what we call a revolving door problem.
Yeah.
You come, you have a few sessions, we'll get you back on your feet, get you back to work, but it's not really solved. So you end up coming back again and again. And ultimately that person is likely to be the person who would fall out of work. And then if we talk about actually if you're unable to work, there's a whole heap of risk that comes with being unable to work, because work is actually quite good for us if it's the right kind of work in the right kind of environment and balance.
How I know when I've talked to therapists before, they've said to me therapists have therapists. Do you have somebody that looks after physio, other physios for physios? Because you must be an absolute nightmare to... I mean, I know you well, you're lovely, but you must... I'll put that in there quickly. You must be an absolute nightmare to work with, because you'll be questioning the advice that you're given. And I know you've had a spout of ill health, physical ill health certainly, and I'm sure it will have impacted you mentally over the last couple of months, like you say, a rubbish summer. How does that world work, and is there support for that industry?
That's
NHS or private sector?
That's a really good question, because there isn't actually routinely. You know, if I worked in the NHS where I did, there was an occupational health department, but I was the physio, you know, and I had a colleague, and there were nurses and there was a doctor and what have you. But beyond that, actually, there isn't anything formal. But of course you seek out colleagues, or you generally would do that, and I have done that. I'm sure we'll get onto that. What was interesting when I set up Design to Move, so I intentionally set up Design to Move to serve that group of clients who really needed something much more significant, and they did need a bespoke program building that was very much aligned with their goals, whatever that was. And if you imagine your whole life has been changed by a major accident, that actually you question a whole heap of yourself, the future, what you're going to do, whether you can return to what you did before, whether it's hobbies or work. And so that really was, I created a kind of structure, but within that structure it was very personalised to that individual's goals, and that was what we were always working towards.
Heather, let's dive into your experience. I feel like we've delayed it enough and quite significant for you, so let's take a breath. I talked about the prioritising, and the whole show is about prioritising our own mental health and well-being. Let's talk about where you were, the situation, the success you were having.
I kind of started it in 2013, 14. It was probably an idea in 2010, and I was just seeing an occasional client myself, and then it grew. 2018, I stopped all other work because I was still doing bits of clinic work and stuff like that. And 2019, we were kind of doubling turnover every year. It was growing. We were seeing more and more clients. The team was getting bigger. We had a system, had a little management team and stuff. It was all going well.
And then?
Well, probably during 2018, I felt really exhausted. And it was the autumn of that year. And I was busy putting it down to actually a whole multitude of life-changing things. You know, that index of stressful events. I had quite a few of those going on, or had. Lost my dad in 2017 quite suddenly. We'd moved house, changed job. I'd had another job that was quite full on that didn't really work out, and so then we lost another couple of relatives within quick succession. My son was taking his GCSEs, and I got to the kind of October of 2018 and thought, I'm really tired. I really don't feel very well. I don't feel good at all.
If I can interrupt you, which is quite normal. They are normal signs that normal people experience. It's just this kind of, I always say there's always a reason but never an excuse, and actually
Yeah.
you felt like, okay, actually the reason is because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, you got all this stuff happening. I was a busy mum, business owner, trying to keep all the plates spinning. We had these multiple bereavements, and then what happened? So this 2018, it is interesting because I was we talk the terminology, thinking, well, I'm exhausted, I'm feeling burnt out.
And burnouts.
I need to get on top of things, and I am someone. I've always been quite health conscious. So I was busy trying to improve my sleep. I was trying to improve my nutrition. I was trying to keep myself fit. I was doing all of that stuff, and none of it felt like it was really working. I was just kind of keeping my head above water. And then it was December, and we'd had a great administrator working with us, but as the business was growing, she'd already started saying, I can't do any more hours. As you're growing, I can't do the hours that you're going to need. So we brought in some virtual VAs, got them trained up, because she also was going to take a month's holiday. So we thought, well, let's get them trained up before she goes on holiday. She went on holiday. They were trained up. 2 days later, they resigned. Myself and my other colleague basically had, delegated beautifully all this stuff to the VAs, and then it basically all came straight back onto me and my colleague just before Christmas 2018. And so that was, get into Christmas thing. We tended to shut at Christmas in terms of most people, the people who referred to us went home, insurers, solicitors, what have you, weren't available. So we kind of shut down. So I was thinking, well, I'm looking forward to having a break. And then basically we got to do all the admin ourselves again. And it was the beginning of December that I started getting some serious headaches. And that's when it really kicked off.
Again, do you think headaches, these are really serious headaches? I experience migraines. Do you just think, okay, some signs here, I need to start going to talk to somebody?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because I don't normally suffer from headaches, so this was new, and it was one day in particular that I got a really sudden, sharp headache behind my eye, like somebody was stabbing me behind my eye. That was unusual for me. But I just had this thing happen with the VAs, and I'm just like, I'm so tired, I'm really stressed, I really need a rest. I must have a rest. The other thing that happened is I've got a dog. You might see the picture of my dog. And my dog had arrived with me, and I'd actually thought, that's a whole other story, how he arrived with me. But I was
a special part bonus episode on the dog.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And he's from the Hearing Dogs charity, because I also have some hearing loss. So there's quite a procedure in receiving a dog, which includes a lot of training. And I actually felt like I maybe was allergic to him. I had this feeling of congestion in my face and behind this eye, and it was like I had a one-sided cold. Oh, this is really weird. Maybe I'm allergic. I've never been allergic to a dog in my life. We've had dogs and cats as children, never allergic. So I thought, well, that's a bit strange. I had daily training with this dog, so I didn't really have time to... I was struggling. Every day, this headache went away, but then it came back every day, and then it would go away, and then it would come back and it'd go away. And I'm having this training with this dog, and the administration's going pear-shaped, and I just can't wait for Christmas to come and just rest, but it wasn't a looking forward to a great time. It was a just get under the duvet and sleep kind of plan. So yeah, I was still reasoning it out. And then actually it stopped. The headache stopped. And I had a couple of weeks where they went away, and I thought, oh, well, it was probably right then. It's probably stress, probably doing too much. Got to get these new VAs in place, get that back on track. So we're now end of 2018. The headaches reappeared in January 2019. And that's the point at which I took myself to a very well-known optician chain, who listened to everything I said, and then my symptoms were very, very subtle, to the point where he kind of went, well, I can't really see anything wrong, but from everything you've told me, I want to refer you on. So I then went on to an ophthalmologist, non-urgent appointment, January through to end of March. That guy then referred me for a scan, MRI, or CT scan of my brain, which was done in April, and then I had another scan in the May, which,
wow.
Yeah.
5 months of worry whilst running a business.
5 months of struggling with the business, keeping everything going, feeling more and more exhausted, but feeling like I've got to keep going. It's like a treadmill, isn't it? It's your responsibility. You've got clients relying on you, customers and a team.
I look at it as like a two-lane road that you've got to keep travelling on one side, and the business has got to travel, and having that capacity to be able to deal with someone else throwing. I love my analogies. Another lane, another car coming onto the motorway, and you're going, I'm driving down here. I can do this. I can exist, and I can run a business.
Yeah.
But you're also dealing with that challenge of you as your medical challenge.
And it was interesting because on a medical level, I'd sort of consciously decided that there were various things that it couldn't be. I'd ruled out because the symptoms weren't classic. So I was like, well, it's not that, and it's not that, and it's not that. So by the time I got to the ophthalmologist, I was almost saying to him, is it just migraines? I know that, migraines can be serious and significant, but
is it that?
Is it stress and migraines? And he very wisely, of course, said, well, we need to be sure.
So what was the point when you found out what actually was happening and what?
So I had my second scan on the bank holiday Sunday of the first bank holiday in May. And I say that because that's significant because they're closed on a Monday, NHS. And I was due to fly to Geneva on the Thursday because I was due to speak our World Congress of Physiotherapy about return to work. And I was very excited. And my mum was coming with me. And I had worked out, as one does, I'd read the letter and I'd looked at what the scan was about, and I'm like, oh, okay. If they're looking for something in my brain, which they were, there may be a reason I shouldn't fly. So they said, well, you need to phone us on Tuesday. So I phoned them on Tuesday and I said, I'm supposed to be getting on a plane on Thursday morning. If there's something on that scan that means I should not get on a plane, will someone please call me?
Yeah.
I got a call on Wednesday afternoon saying, you need to bring an overnight bag. You're going to come into the hospital. You're going to have to stay overnight. You're going to have to run a whole load of tests and investigations. The consultant will call you in an hour.
Wow.
So then when the consultant did call me, he told me that they'd found a clot in my brain. So we talk about deep vein thrombosis. I basically had a deep vein thrombosis in my brain, somewhere back here, that was causing the headaches.
You definitely don't get on a plane.
I was so grateful actually not to get on a plane, but I was really shocked. So I took my overnight bag, was already packed for my flight to Geneva. So I took that to Derby Royal instead and found myself...
A holiday bag, not like bikinis and all of that there.
Well, thankfully there was none of that because I was going to a professional conference, but
Fair enough. Just some nice dresses to the hospital.
Yeah, and...
I made light of it, but I'm sure your mind was racing.
I think I was just in shock. I was like, well, how can that be? Because then they said, when I got there and you go through admissions and things like that, they said, we're putting you on the stroke unit. I was like, a stroke unit? But I haven't had any of those classic stroke symptoms. So, probably a lot of people listening will have heard of the FAST things. I didn't really have any of those. The only thing I'd had was my eye would start, when the headache got really bad, this eye would close, but it was so imperceptible that even I had to look in the mirror and go, oh, it feels like it wants to close, but it doesn't look any different. I didn't have any of the other classic symptoms, so I was not expecting that.
So what was your... I'm asking this, I know quite a lot of this already, but so what was your official diagnosis at that time then?
It's called a cerebral venous sinus thrombosis.
So I wouldn't have remembered that. So
very, very rare.
Like say DVT, but in
your brain, yeah, and actually in the jugular vein of my brain.
Like a stroke, but not.
See, there's two types of strokes. You have some strokes that are bleeds, so that we hear a lot about. That you actually have a bleed into the brain, and then the other type is what we call an ischemic stroke, where you've got a clot, so the oxygen supply, blood supply gets cut off.
Goodness.
So basically, the conclusion was that the awful sudden pain I'd had in the December, the first time I had the pain, was probably the point at which the clot got, or this blockage happened, and then effectively, thankfully, my capillary system, whatever you want to call it, in your brain had worked its way around it all those months.
Now I'm going to put this in because there'll be people watching and listening going, that's happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've said already, some of these symptoms are general things that happen for general reasons.
Yeah.
Migraines, albeit are very severe. My mum and I experienced them.
Mm.
I know many people that do. I
Yeah.
only, on a few occasions, had to go and sleep in a dark room because of it.
Yeah.
So it's not always the case that that you'll have what you've had.
Mm.
I can understand why you perhaps didn't think it was as severe as it was.
No, I didn't. You know, and people might say, "Well, she's a physio," but my area of physiotherapy overlaps with neurology. But I don't have a daily working knowledge of what strokes look like as they're happening. And actually, had I seen the fast symptoms, I think there is a letter now, which I can't remember, I'm afraid, off the top of my head. But if I'd have had those, I'd have been, right, sort yourself out. I actually did wonder if I was having a bleed. But the fact that I was having this conversation with myself, I thought, well, probably not. And I was still stood there 10 minutes later. I think, you know, in terms of what to look for, it is cluing up on what it could be. And if it's unusual for you, you know, I didn't generally get headaches, but the headaches went away. So they went away every day. It wasn't there all the time. It would come and then it would go.
You have them every day then?
Yeah, I had them every day for a couple of weeks and then they stopped. And it was when they restarted that I went and got it checked out. I think, like anything, if it's unusual for you, you should get it checked out. And I don't necessarily recommend doing what a healthcare professional would do, in that you're kind of trying to self-diagnose, work your way through it. But I would never have expected because I'm also, this is what was kind of interesting. I'm relatively low risk for a classic stroke. There's lots of risk factors that's out there in the general knowledge. You can easily access the risk factors, and I didn't really have any of those risk factors, so we didn't know why at that point.
Forgive me to go back to the business, because that's quite significant, and I'm trying to process it. I think I can't remember if you've told me that phrase before, because it's such complex, and we're talking about it in such amount of detail to you and I have ever spoken about it. And thank you for sharing it. We're talking about running a business alongside all of this.
Yeah.
Where did this leave the business? So, forgive me on that. That sounds really unempathetic.
It's a very good question.
Because I'm just picturing. So let's set the scene. You've got this business. You've got your administrator that went off. You tried to have VAs to support. You're growing. You're successful. You've got all of these people in Newcastle.
We didn't have that many people at that point, but it was growing.
To do, and you're thinking, I need to take some time out and prioritise me.
Yeah.
Because something serious is happening here.
Yeah.
Where on earth did that leave you?
But prior to the diagnosis, I was just plate juggling, like a lot of people relate to. I was just trying to keep going. And I would say that, you know, the advantage of being self-employed, of building a little team, was that I was able to be flexible. If I needed to go and lie down, which would help my headache subside, I could. I worked from home.
So you carried on?
I carried on. I just flexed what I did. At that point, I wasn't going to loads of appointments because we didn't know what was wrong. A lot of it, I was waiting around. I had a few clients. I wasn't driving masses. I mean, there was a lot of driving involved, but I wasn't doing a lot at that point. I just carried on. I just flexed what I did.
Do you regret that?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Not especially, because I'm a huge believer, and I'm sure we'll get onto this, that my approach to return to work rehab is that actually what's really most important is you look at what you can do and what you can't do. It's not really about the diagnosis, it's not really about the treatment, it's about what are you capable of. And I did what I was capable of. I did less. I probably still put a lot of pressure on myself because I was frustrated that I couldn't do what I wanted to do, what I felt I needed to do. That internal drive was high and I couldn't meet it. And I'm sure actually that, in hindsight, that approach to life in general was not serving me well. I pushed myself, well, other people said it as well to me, I probably pushed myself too hard, but I didn't see it like that. At the time, I saw it as, I'm trying to do the best job I can. It's got to be good. It's got to be high standard. And I just probably pushed myself harder than necessary. But I basically, if you look at a trajectory, I was just steadily doing less, less and less.
To try and reduce.
And then even after the diagnosis, I was in hospital for 2 or 3 days. This sounds really awful. I went home.
It's normal.
I couldn't go to Geneva, but I was back home at the weekend, and my talk was Sunday afternoon. So I recorded it in my home office and sent it off to them. So they still played it. They played it to a live audience, and I wasn't there.
Story that you got to be there as in virtual form, I guess.
Yeah, and I think I was just still in shock at that point as well, because here I was being told I'd had a stroke, but I'd now been discharged from the stroke unit on all kinds of medication, but still with we don't know why, but we're going to make this referral. We'll find out why it's happened. So I'm in a bit of a limbo.
I guess that's the reality of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't you don't spend a week at the hospital.
Some people might, but yeah.
But you don't.
For me, it wasn't.
Spend, you're in there, you're out there, you're in there, you're out there. We talked earlier about the different teams that might coordinate all these appointments.
Yeah.
And it's that you're kind of waiting for that next one, aren't you?
And I was actually, said that, well, I'll get an appointment for outpatient neurology. Well, that was 5 months till that came around. So I'd been given this diagnosis. I didn't really understand. I didn't see any of my scans. It was 5 months till I actually saw somebody to discuss it properly in outpatients. But in the meantime, I ended up with a specialist appointment with haematology, which was another shock. So that was the next step, is they said, well, we don't know what's caused it, but we've taken a load of blood off you, and we think there's a problem with your blood. So passed you on to the next department. So I got a routine letter to see them in 6 weeks. Then I got the letter from the hospital, the kind of discharge letter, copied to the haematology department, saying, these are the results we've got. And then I got that my appointment that was 6 weeks ago got moved forward rapidly. And the next thing is I'm in what's called specialist outpatients and oncology. And anyone who knows what oncology is cancer care. So then I was scared. So I'm like, okay, what the hell does that mean? What is this? So basically the upshot was that they discovered I had a rare form of blood cancer where I had been producing too many platelets, and that's what had led to the clotting. And that had been, goodness knows how long that had been going on. They reckon it's to do with a genetic mutation, which probably would have happened in the preceding 5 years. No particular known cause.
No signs.
No signs, no symptoms, because it's doing its thing in the background. And most people get caught before the symptoms. They have some sort of symptoms. They maybe have a blood test before they get a clot. Whereas I got the clot first, and that was how I presented, with the symptoms. So yeah, that was a kind of double whammy.
Yeah.
And that's been a really hard thing, actually, to get my head around two scenarios.
But linked. But two very different, thinking it's being dealt with to then get that second blow, I guess.
Yes, and it also, the difference is that the stroke, if you like, the clot is a one-time incident. Blood cancer's not. Blood cancer's for life. So suddenly you feel it, like, okay, that was a close shave. But then you're being told, well, actually, you've got this other thing, and this is serious, and you're going to have to manage it, and you're going to have to be on medication for the rest of your life. Again, it is life-threatening, but not if I stay on the medication.
But manageable.
But can be managed and treated. But yeah, so that whole, couple of months wasn't even a couple of months. It was probably like 4 or 5 weeks. Thinking I'm just having headaches through to 2 different weird diagnostics.
I'm going to move on for a moment because I think we can come back to this in a moment as well, if that's okay. Because one of the things that I know you speak very, very passionately about is running a business, being successful, and having these life-changing
Yeah.
things that happen to you that are unexpected. And you're
Yeah.
a big advocate for that now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Is that solely because of what you've gone through? I guess a lot of your experience
Well, I was already,
supports that.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, of course, I was already in this world and very passionate about the return to work thing. But I often say, you know, actually, I just basically had to turn around and put all my years of knowledge and experience on to myself. I think, flip, now you've got to keep running a business, stay in work, try to handle this health condition and keep the whole thing going. Right. Okay, you know, the reality of doing it for yourself is very different. And where do I get the help? There is no help. There's no help for what I call vocational rehabilitation. That's the official terminology, return to work and remain in work support. There is no help if you have something that develops like this. The world I was in, if you had a serious accident or injury, the process, the claims process, insurance and stuff, funds the rehabilitation, funds this team that we were talking about earlier. That doesn't exist.
Because that's the given, isn't it? So many people have policies. They might have life insurance. They'll have critical illness policies in place. Many people don't.
Many people don't.
Relevant life insurance, is it? I can't remember the terminology of it now.
They're all slightly different, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many of them, and I'll not ask you insurance questions per se.
That was what was interesting, is that suddenly here I am. I have all this knowledge. I've got, like, you know, a lot of years of experience in return to work. Okay, not in strokes or blood cancer at that point. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But a lot of the principles are similar. And then the condition is, you work with the condition, but the principles of how you know, do it are similar. So I had to do all of that. I also hugely fortunate. I've got an amazing network. So I was able to find the people I knew I needed help from, many of whom are friends, and kind of build my own team from a medical point of view. But from a business point of view, it was weird. It was crazy. I thought, there was part of me that thought, well, now I've got a diagnosis, now I'm on the medication, I'm going to start feeling better. I didn't. I actually just carried on getting worse. I think the side effects of the medication was fairly hefty. So from the May through to the September, I was still doing less and less and less.
And you've got bills to pay.
Yes, but by this point, the business
trajectory.
wasn't dependent on me bringing revenue in. The team was bringing revenue in, and I had a couple of 2 or 3 people as a sort of leadership team running the day-to-day. So I was just literally each week looking at how many hours I could work and trying to shave a few off because I was more and more exhausted. I eventually got to that outpatient appointment in neurology 5 months later. The day I went there, I thought, I'm going to have to take a week off. I'm so tired, I can't carry on. I'm going to have to take a week off. And I got in.
How many weeks is it you took off in the end?
I took about 6 off. But it was really interesting because I sat in that consultation with a very good neurologist who said to me, can you take some time off? You need. And I said, well, I'm going to take a week. And she was like, I don't think so. She said, you need at least a month off, and then you need to, we talk about phased and graded returns to work, build it back up. So we're like, yes, we'll do that. But I needed her permission. I still hadn't seen a scan. There was a part of me that didn't believe it. I felt terrible. I was on all these drugs, but I still didn't believe it. And but yeah, that was the point where I just felt I had to kind of give in and go, yeah, I do need to take a break. So thankfully, my little team, we'd been talking about delegating the plan as you grow a business, you know, to delegate more to the team, business not be so dependent on you. We were going towards that. We weren't quite ready, but we did it in 3 days. I literally handed everything over in 3 days and stopped.
I think it's such a, I don't know if the word privilege is great, but just a privileged position to be in, to be able to pass that to them. I'm sure it might have not felt like that at the time. And having
I was pleased that we'd built the business to that point, and I was able to do it, and those people were able to pick it up. Yeah.
And you'd worked hard to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And something that you were doing naturally anyway.
Yeah, so I didn't have a plan in place for what happens if Heather gets ill, which is what I would now advocate for.
Yeah, and I've seen you
But-
present and talk about this so passionately now.
Yeah, but actually some of it was already there because of as a business grows, you're looking to delegate and build out your capacity and become more robust anyhow. So it's not dependent on you anymore. So yeah, that bit of it worked. I also had income protection insurance, but I have learned the hard way that did not cover what happened to me. If you've got income protection, I won't go into all the detail, but income protection, critical illness policy, they're very, very specific. And it didn't apply.
Humour me on that. Why didn't it apply? What, specifically because of what you had? Or?
Well, the couple of things really, that if you've ever taken out income protection insurance, for example, there's usually a wait period before the payments will kick in.
Okay.
And the longer the wait period, the cheaper your policy. So when I took it out, I put a 3-month wait period in because I knew that in theory I had 3 months worth of, backup salary or what have you, which is one of the things that we would talk about, and it's good business practice to have some reserves for the business and for you personally. So I had a 12-week wait before my policy could kick in. I've never taken 12 weeks off, despite having 2 very serious diagnoses, ever. It's never come to that. So actually, in hindsight, I would have paid a little bit extra and had an earlier date to get some, because that's where you can access support. That's where you not only potentially get some money to replace your income, but also you may be able to access some rehabilitation support. So yeah, it's interesting learning.
It's a minefield. Yeah. Let's do some quick fire questions perhaps on these then. So, because I'm hearing this, and you absolutely, you talk about this in your roadmap with, and we're not here to sell, but certainly I've sat and listened to it, and it's made sense to me. It made logical sense to me, having had my own challenges and having. I think I am my own challenge. I think I am the person that doesn't let me stop.
We are. I think that's really interesting as business owners. Just to interrupt, is that actually we are our biggest challenge, but we are also our biggest risk. Yeah. We are the biggest problem as a business owner. You create something brand new, you build it up, and if you implode it, it can implode if it's not got to a stage where it's big enough to cope with that. And a lot of, we're quite driven people, motivated people, probably push ourselves too hard. So we do see a contrast. There's a couple of things I talk about there, and that there's a what I call 100% risk, and a lot of people believe that you've got to be 100% well before you go back to work after a period of absence. But a lot of conditions these days, people don't get 100% better, whether it's back pain or cancer or what have you. There's side effects and there's long-term consequences. So you may never feel like you did before it happened. And if you wait for that to happen, you'll never get back to work. But then the flip side of self-employed business owners is that we want to get back and do everything tomorrow at full speed, just like we did before.
Or their laptop in the hospital on their bed.
Exactly.
I'm looking at you when I say that. Absolutely. But we do, don't we?
Yeah.
I take my iPad everywhere with me now.
And actually don't stop at all, and or if you do stop, you then expect to go back to work on Monday and do everything and work full time. That doesn't work either. It's crash and burn.
It's not that easy though for everyone, and we acknowledge that. I think there's I think
they're too extreme.
We've got to say that there are people that I don't want people to feel guilty that they can't do that, because some people don't have this available to them. Because it isn't as straightforward. You say you've got to be at the right point in the business.
Yeah.
What are your top 2 tips of things? I'm going to sneak some information out of your roadmap for our valuable listeners that are loyal listeners and watchers.
So there's kind of...
What do they need to be doing to prepare for an eventuality?
Yeah,
and I don't want to be doom and gloom.
I
want to just be reality and just say these things might happen to you. So you're better with them in place.
And I think, what there's kind of 3 parts to that anyway, and I'll give you a couple of tips from the first one. But the first part is about preparing for the unexpected. And that I focus on your health as a business leader, and what is that as a business owner and leader, and how can you plan and mitigate for that. But actually what the people who've worked with me so far discover is that, of course, it might be your child that's unwell, or it might be a parent that's unwell. And of course, actually there's a real pressure point in our 40s-ish, 50s-ish, when your parents are becoming older, but your children are super active, maybe if you've got kids, or you might have a really close friend that becomes ill and you want to support them, and maybe multiple reasons why you need to step away from your business. And if you've prepared as if you were taken ill, actually you're ready for as much as you can be for any of those. So there's being prepared for something in case it happens. Then there's dealing with what I call the inflection point, when something happens, the crisis point, because most of us don't expect it, don't see it coming. It might be sudden, it might be slow, like mine, but it might also be sudden. And in that phase, that's super confusing, distressing, stressful on you and everyone around you, business and family. So that's that phase. And then there's the after. There's how do you get yourself back together at the right pace for you, because it can be a very long period, but that doesn't mean you need to be off sick all that time. And how do you create something that's workable? So that's the kind of 3 parts to it. And what I have is people say, I don't want to think about it. I don't think about it going wrong. But if you think about it as good business practice, have financial reserves.
Be able to go and sit on a beach somewhere. You don't have to be planning.
You think of it as like, how do I take 6 weeks out to go and have a holiday?
So somebody said to me once was, your job is to make yourself redundant.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
your job. The business doesn't need you any longer. How can you do that?
Yeah, so that might be it. It might be actually, well, take this as a way to, how do you plan to be able to take a month out from your business and it not fall apart? So that's, what are your systems? Are your systems in your head? Still, your operational systems, have you written them down and shared them with somebody else, who means that someone else could do the payments, the pay runs? Someone else can actually access the bank account. That's a big one. Can someone else access the bank accounts to pay your suppliers?
Protocols and policies, and
I
hear my HR head come on there
exactly.
Going, don't accidentally pay a bill from a scammer.
Actually,
there are processes, like you say, that great. You might be the person that accidentally pays that bill. When you're sat on a beach and someone says, "Can you pay this?" and you misread it.
Yeah. So having policies and procedures, I think, out of your head and on paper somewhere, even if it's in a filing cabinet and you work on your own, and you tell somebody, if something happens to me, you need to go and ring the bank, and you need to do this and you need to do that. There's the information. Then there is things like financial security. So do look at, have you got income protection, life insurance, critical illness policy? Do you need them? What are the pros of them? What are the cons of them? You may have, I have some clients who get that through a spouse, so they don't need life insurance because they've already got it, and they've got maybe really good cash reserves, so they don't think that's a priority, but it might be, and that you need to go and speak to a financial advisor to get that lined up. And probably the other big one is the legal side of things, is who is legally able to make decisions in your business if you're not there. Now I'm now a sole trader, self-employed. It's only me. There is nobody else. That's the risk I'm aware of. I can't do anything about it right now, and I choose that. That's where I'm at with a brand new business now. But if you've thought about that and contracts, what's in your contract if you're not able to deliver the service and it's dependent on you? Are you going to refund? Are you going to postpone? Have you got a colleague that you've got lined up that can step in and do substitute speaking or training?
I was going to say, I have that as a speaker in my contract. If I don't turn up, I can't charge. If I'm the one that cancels, then I'll try and send a substitute, but ultimately I'll have to give that money back.
Yes. Yeah. So is that written into your contract?
Yeah.
We had it written into ours not after my situation, after some general situations and the world we're in. And things like that is, you don't want to find, or actually it might not even be you, it might be your relative who's now worrying about you in a hospital bed and your business, which they know nothing about.
Yes. And that person that's going, is it going to turn up? Are we getting our money back? What's going on?
No, and so actually the business itself becomes at risk if you haven't thought about any of that, because the person closest to you who's trying to support you is also obviously probably pretty distressed that you're unwell or injured, is also being expected to sort out your business. Just as an example, actually I had a client through the serious injury business, but she was self-employed. She worked with her dad. She was involved in a very serious car accident, ended up in intensive care for 3 to 4 weeks. Nice. That business was able to carry on because her elderly father was still running it, but the plan was to hand it over to her. But she and her husband have 4 children, all below 10. Her husband took time off to care for the children, and his employers turned around and said, we understand it's a really difficult situation, but we need to know when you're going to be back at work. And he's like, I don't know. My wife's been in intensive care for a week, and I don't know when she's coming home.
So no, we don't know.
I know, and he lost his job.
Goodness.
So the ripple out on everyone around you, and obviously then that had long-term implications for whether she could take on the family business as well, was huge.
Goodness.
There is a lot to think about.
I'm looking at the time and we are rapidly running out of time. I often think we could do 2 parts to many, many, many episodes. I wanted to ask you, in terms of like the future of health management in the workplace, do you see that world changing with the change of government, change of legislation? I know we're seeing lots of things still coming from the EU. We'll not get too political here today, but do you think we'll see changing for the better? Is there some wants that you want to see change?
It's a really difficult one because what I've now been around long enough to see some initiatives come around again.
Okay.
So, you know, what was I was involved in what was called Back in Work project back in 2000, which was about helping SMEs manage sickness absence, and actually that was about creating a support structure with the NHS and with bigger companies. So big corporations sharing occupational health support, stuff like that. It worked really well, but of course it didn't ever really get rolled out in a way that, I mean, there were something like 20 projects around the UK, and I was involved in one because the shipyard and another company were involved in supporting all the SMEs up there. So I'm a little bit cynical, I'm afraid.
How about leaders? What more do you think we can be doing for leaders?
Well, I think that's probably where I'm most passionate, because I think there's a good understanding now of occupational health for employees, especially in larger businesses. I do think it's a problem in SMEs because actually SMEs don't have the resources that a large organisation does to put in place good occupational health policies, return to work support, therapies, all that kind of stuff. So I think there's an SME problem, and then I think there's a leader problem. The leaders are spending all their resources making sure all those policies, processes, HR, occupational health are there for the team, but not thinking about what happens when it's them. Now, in theory, when it's them, they can access those occupational health services. But those occupational health services I've worked in them a long time, they're very broad. They are not necessarily going to address the concerns that you have as a leader, an executive, a leadership owner, because that's a very different to the person who's employed and is getting several months of full sick pay and support and building a return to work plan. You've got a whole different set of challenges. So that's where I'm
fit for purpose as we would like it to be.
No,
more work on it then.
Not for the leaders. You know, I think it needs to be a more bespoke approach. We talked about that word earlier, and I think it's critically important because as a small business is growing, that leader needs to be fit and well. I honestly as well believe that the business health is dependent on the leader health in every sense of the word, mind, body, spirit. So if the leader's struggling, the business is likely to struggle. Especially
if they own the business, if they're an SME, micro business owner,
and I think
self-employed.
We both know.
We are now,
that actually what's really interesting about the UK is we are a country of small business owners. 97%.
So,
it's huge.
Yeah.
And that's micro businesses, so that's less than 10 employees. And that's the backbone of our economy.
And those are the ones that need it then. So where do you
get really
I'm standing on my soapbox, not literally for those who can say. I feel like getting up and just saying, what can we do? And I've been telling people I've written to the new Prime Minister, etc. I wonder if I need to be writing to different people, the Health Secretary, the people there, whether they will listen, I think is the one challenge.
I don't know. I mean, there's a whole other conversation around whether this is work should be a healthcare outcome. However, our healthcare services are not set up to support work. And that's, again, one of the newer initiatives. I can't remember what it was called, but the one that got launched by the previous government and is probably under review right now is about integrating healthcare with what we call vocational and job return to work services. That should be what's being done, but it's been tried before. It's not integrated yet.
We'll sort it
It
out.
will. It'll take time. But I think my bit for leaders is, as a leader, you're used to taking action in your business. You're used to making decisions. You're used to going and finding solutions, and you have to be willing and prepared to do that for yourself when it comes to your own health.
Before you get to the point where you are irrational and don't have the capacity to do it, you need to plan ahead.
Yes.
Or have a great system that we're trying to produce and create ecosystem that we're trying to create to be able to do this. So, have I missed anything, Carol? I'm looking at my big long list here of all the things that I wanted to talk to you about today. I haven't spoken about the mentoring that you do with people. I think you've kind of covered it to a degree. That's what you do. You talk and support people.
Yes, I tend to work with small business owners. So I have this roadmap that we talked about that is a sort of preventative thing. But actually, if somebody's impacted in the moment, with something significant and serious, and they don't know how to cope, I work one-to-one with people there, and then with the aftermath, because the aftermath might be a few months or it might be the rest of your life, and you need a strategy to work that out.
I feel like we do need a whole like a podcast tips or a series of. I'm looking behind the camera. We need like a series of Instagram kind of clips of tips for people to have. So
we can do something like that.
Absolutely. I'm sure you'll have all of those on your social medias. Where can people find you? What do we type into Instagram, LinkedIn to be able to find you?
So on LinkedIn, it's Heather K. McLellan. The spelling is a bit of a nightmare, but as long as you get it right in your show notes, that'll be
McLelleln.
That's too many L's.
Yeah. Okay. Somewhere in there.
So that's LinkedIn.
I'll be on the show notes.
The website is hkm22.com. So we take out all the L's. Instagram hkm22 _ I think consulting.
We'll find them out on there. Thank you so much. You've added some real value, not only to the podcast and to the people that follow, but also to me sat here and listening, and made me just think about what I'm doing, what I've started on this year. As you know, I'm an investor in a business now, and I'm doing, this is my sole focus really, or my main focus, should I say. And you've made me think about what I do with the powers of attorney that I have in place.
Yes.
All of those things. And no good piece of paper sat in the cupboard if people don't know what to do when they've got power of it. Well, if they've got power of attorney, they don't know what to do. So, what the bank? Who I even bank with?
The looking forward is really interesting. Now, one of my mantras is creating work that works for you, and creating that reassurance and consistency going forward. And actually, if you look now at how you're going to influence the rest of your working life, of which hopefully you have many years of enjoyable working life and healthy working life, it's worth investing the time in it.
It's kind of plan for a beach, but also have a backup plan for an eventuality like we've discussed today.
Yeah, and
I find a more catchy version of that for you.
Yeah, and I don't intend to frighten people, but I do hear repeatedly, I don't want to think about it. So just a sobering thought to finish on is that 1 in 2 people will get cancer at some point in their lives now. 1 in 2. So if it's not you, be somebody close to you, and you may want to step away from your business for a while. Now the good news is most of it highly treatable. People are recovering, they're living much longer, possibly though with side effects, possibly with long-term medication. It's highly likely something's going to happen that you need to mitigate for. So let's not bury our heads in the sand. Let's take a sensible attitude. Let's say, well, let's hope it never happens. And actually what I get to have instead is a 6-week beach holiday and I don't have to do anything.
Absolutely. And then we'll look on the brighter side.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Heather. I really appreciate it.
It's been great to chat with you.
Yes,
Thank
we'll
you.
look forward to seeing all the feedback that we get flying through
So.
to us. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.